The night it happened, the city felt like it was holding its breath. Rain clung to the streetlights and turned the pavement into a mirror. Sirens moved in the distance like a warning you couldn't quite translate. In the windows of late-night diners and corner stores, faces flickered and disappeared as if everyone had learned the same lesson long ago: don't become the story. At 10:17 p.m., a small coffee shop on the edge of downtown Detroit buzzed with tired voices and wet coats. The kind of place where people came to warm their hands and forget the day had teeth. A woman stepped in from the rain, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low and jeans splashed at the cuffs. She shook the water from her sleeves, pushed back the hood just enough to see the menu, and joined the line like she'd done it 100 times. Her name was Captain Naomi Kingsley. But nobody in that shop knew that. Not the barista who glanced at her and looked away, not the businessman who tightened his grip on his phone, not the couple in the corner who lowered their voices when she passed, and definitely not the 2 uniformed officers who shoved the door open a moment later as if the room belonged to them. Sergeant Raymond "Ray" Dorsey walked in first, thick-necked and loud even when he wasn't speaking. He had the kind of confidence that didn't come from courage. It came from never being questioned. Officer Ethan Price followed him, younger, fresh out of the academy, posture too rigid, eyes too alert. A rookie trying to look like he wasn't. They'd been on patrol for hours. Dorsey had been complaining the entire time about the rain, about paperwork, about people who don't know their place. He spotted Naomi in line and his mouth curled like he'd found entertainment. "Look at that," he muttered, not as quiet as he thought. "Hood up indoors, like she's hiding from God." Ethan didn't laugh. He didn't like the tone, but he stayed silent anyway. Naomi stayed facing forward. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. She ordered her thoughts the same way she ordered her heartbeat. Calm, controlled, invisible. Dorsey stepped closer, crowding her space. "Hey," he said, "Hoodie, you got something to hide?" Naomi glanced at him once, just once, and then back to the menu. "Just ordering coffee," she said. Her voice wasn't soft. It wasn't loud. It was steady. That steadiness irritated him. "I asked you a question." She didn't feed him emotion. She didn't argue. She simply repeated, "I'm ordering coffee." Dorsey's eyes swept her face like he was searching for permission to disrespect her. He found it in his own assumptions. "You got ID?" he asked. Naomi's eyebrow lifted slightly. "For coffee?" "Don't get smart." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Sergeant," Dorsey cut him off without looking back. "Relax, Price. You're going to learn. People like this test you. They push until you fold." Naomi turned fully toward him now. The coffee shop seemed to tighten around the movement. Conversations faded. The barista froze with a cup in her hand. "People like what?" Naomi asked. Dorsey smiled as if she'd handed him the rope. "Don't play dumb." The silence stretched. Ethan felt it like pressure behind the eyes. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not playing anything," she said. "I'm ordering coffee." Dorsey leaned in, breath sharp with the confidence of someone used to winning. "You're going to show me ID," he said, "or you're going to get dragged out of here." Naomi held his eyes for a long second. Then she reached slowly toward her pocket. Ethan's hand hovered near his belt. His training told him to be ready. His instincts told him this was wrong. Naomi didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a small leather wallet. She opened it halfway. Not fully. Just enough. Dorsey snatched it from her hand. "See? That wasn't hard," he said. He flipped it open, scanned it, then frowned like he didn't understand what he was seeing. Not because it was fake, because it was official, because it carried weight, but he didn't look long enough to read it properly. He didn't want to. He snapped it shut and shoved it back at her. "Cute," he said. "You think you're special." Naomi caught the wallet calmly. "Give it back the way you took it," she said. Dorsey's smile widened. "Excuse me? You heard me." The room held its breath again. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He wanted to step in. He wanted to end this before it became a headline. but he didn't move. Dorsey stepped closer, voice dropping into something uglier. "You're in my city," he said, "and you're going to learn respect." Naomi's eyes stayed level. "Respect isn't demanded," she said. "It's demonstrated." That sentence snapped something in him. Before anyone could process it, Dorsey's hand came up. The slap landed hard, a sharp, wet sound that cut through the coffee shop like a gunshot. Naomi's head turned slightly with the impact. A bead of blood appeared at the corner of her lip. For one breathless second, time stopped. The barista gasped. A man in the corner stood halfway, then froze. Ethan's eyes widened. His body went cold. Dorsey smiled like he'd proven a point. Naomi turned her face back toward him slowly. She touched the blood with her thumb, looked at it, then looked at him again. Her voice didn't shake. "You just made a decision," she said. Dorsey laughed. "Yeah, I did." He grabbed her wrist. "You're coming with us." Naomi didn't resist. That was what made it worse. Not helplessness. Choice. Ethan found his voice, thin with panic. "Sergeant, we don't have probable cause." Dorsey yanked Naomi toward the door. "Probable cause is whatever I say it is." Naomi's eyes met Ethan's for half a second, and in that half second, Ethan saw something that made his chest tighten. Not fear, not rage, recognition. As if she was memorizing him. As if she expected he would matter later. Dorsey shoved Naomi into the back of the cruiser like she was an object. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the glass. Rain tapped against the roof as they drove. Naomi sat with her hands cuffed in front of her, posture straight, breathing steady. Dorsey kept talking, loud and satisfied. "You learned tonight," he said. "You mouth off to cops, you get checked." Ethan stared out the windshield, knuckles white on his knees. Every mile felt like it pushed him further into something he didn't want to be part of. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights made everything look sick. They marched Naomi through the hallway. Officers glanced up, saw her cuffed, and looked away. That was how it worked. If the sergeant decided you were guilty, the building treated you like a fact. Dorsey shoved her toward a holding cell. Naomi turned her head slightly. "I want medical attention," she said calmly, "and I want to make a report." Dorsey barked a laugh. "You want—" He opened the cell and shoved her inside. Metal clanged. The door shut. Naomi stood in the center of the cell, looking through the bars at him. "You're making this worse," she said. Dorsey stepped close to the bars. "You don't get to tell me anything." Ethan stood behind him, throat tight. Naomi's eyes moved past Dorsey, past the swagger, past the certainty, and landed on Ethan again. "You have a choice," she said softly. Ethan swallowed. Dorsey's face hardened. "Don't talk to my rookie." Naomi didn't blink. "He's not yours," she said. Dorsey turned away, already bored with her. "Let her sit. She'll calm down." Hours passed. The precinct shifted into late-night sluggishness. Coffee refilled, jokes traded, paperwork avoided. Naomi sat on the bench inside the cell, hands resting on her knees, face calm, despite the swelling on her cheek. Ethan walked past the cell 3 times. The first time, he didn't look. The second time, he looked and kept walking. The third time, he stopped. He stood just outside the bars, heart pounding. Naomi looked up. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "I'm exactly where I am," she replied. He hesitated. "Why didn't you fight him?" Naomi's voice stayed even. "Because I wanted it on record." Ethan's eyes widened. "On record?" She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "You saw it," she said. "If you stay silent, you become part of it." Ethan's chest tightened. "I'm just a rookie." Naomi held his gaze. "That's when it's easiest to choose right," she said. "Before you learn to call wrong normal." Ethan's throat worked as he swallowed. "I can't," he started. "You can," Naomi said. "It's just expensive." Footsteps approached from down the hallway. Ethan stepped back quickly, acting like he'd never stopped. Dorsey walked by with a smug grin. "Don't get sentimental, Price," he said. "She's playing you." Naomi watched him pass without moving, but her eyes weren't on Dorsey. They were on the building, on the system, on the way a place can swallow people whole. At 5:48 a.m., the holding cell door opened. A sergeant from a different shift stepped in with a clipboard and frowned. "Why is she still here?" he asked. Dorsey, half asleep at the desk, waved him off. "She's disorderly, assaulted an officer." Naomi stood slowly. "That's a lie." The other sergeant looked uncertain. "Any paperwork?" Dorsey shrugged. "I'll do it later." The other sergeant's expression tightened. "We need a charge on file." Dorsey stood, irritation rising. "I said I'll do it later." The other sergeant glanced at Naomi's swollen face, then back at Dorsey. He didn't like what he saw, but he didn't challenge it. He sighed. "Fine, release her. We don't have capacity." Dorsey turned to Naomi. "Get out," he said. "And next time, keep your mouth shut." Naomi stepped out of the cell calmly. She rubbed her wrists where the cuffs had bitten into skin. Ethan stood nearby, eyes fixed on the floor. Naomi stopped beside him, close enough that only he could hear. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Ethan looked up. Her eyes held no threat, only certainty. She walked out into the morning rain without looking back. Dorsey laughed behind her. "Good riddance," he said. Ethan didn't laugh. He watched the door close behind her and felt something in his chest twist, because he realized suddenly he had just witnessed a line being crossed, and he had done nothing to stop it. Naomi walked 3 blocks to a parked car and sat inside for a long time without starting the engine. Her cheek throbbed. Her lip tasted like metal. But her eyes stayed calm. She opened her wallet again and pulled out the ID Dorsey hadn't bothered to read. It wasn't a fake badge. It wasn't a trick. It was a real credential, issued by the same department that had just caged her like an inconvenience. Captain Naomi Kingsley, Internal Affairs Division, newly appointed and scheduled to report for duty in full uniform in 48 hours. She stared at the ID for a long moment. Then she started the engine. The city moved around her like nothing had happened. But a clock had started ticking. And somewhere inside the 42nd precinct, arrogance was still laughing, completely unaware it had just slapped the wrong woman. This story will change how you see power. It will change how you see silence. It will change how you see uniforms. Subscribe to Emotional Storytelling because it will change how you see people forever. 2 days later, the precinct gathered in the briefing room for a shift meeting that felt like any other. Coffee cups, lazy jokes, officers half listening while scrolling on phones. Sergeant Dorsey strutted in late as if time owed him respect. He slapped the whiteboard with the back of his hand. "Listen up," he barked. "We've got a new captain coming in, Internal Affairs, so watch your mouths and pretend you're saints." A few groans. One officer laughed. "IA? Great. Just what we need." Dorsey smirked. Yeah. Smile for the paperwork, then go back to work." Ethan sat near the back, quiet. He hadn't slept much since the coffee shop. The slap replayed in his mind like a loop that wouldn't stop. He hadn't told anyone, not yet. He didn't even know how. The door at the front of the room opened. Bootsteps, sharp, measured. The room shifted into attention automatically, not by choice, but by conditioning. A woman entered in full uniform, crisp navy, captain's bars, badge gleaming under fluorescent lights, hair pulled back tight, posture immaculate. Her face was composed, but the faint trace of healing bruising still lived beneath makeup. Captain Naomi Kingsley walked to the front of the room and faced them. The room went silent. No one breathed loudly. Ethan's heart dropped. Dorsey's smirk faltered. Naomi's eyes moved across the room with slow precision. Then they landed on Sergeant Dorsey and stopped. Dorsey stared at her as if his brain refused to accept reality. No one spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. Naomi broke it first. "Good morning," she said calmly. Her voice was the same voice from the coffee shop, steady, grounded, undeniable. Dorsey's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Naomi continued, tone professional, controlled. "I'm Captain Naomi Kingsley. I will be overseeing internal compliance and integrity operations for this precinct." She let the words settle. Then she took one small step forward. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to make something clear." The air tightened. Her eyes never left Dorsey. "In this precinct," she said, "no one is above procedure." A pause. "No one is above accountability." Another pause. "No one is above consequences." Dorsey's face flushed. His eyes darted around the room as if looking for someone to laugh with him, to confirm this was a joke. No one did. Naomi turned slightly, facing the room. "I'm not here to make enemies," she said. "I'm here to make sure we don't create victims." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Naomi's gaze returned to Dorsey. "Sergeant Dorsey," she said calmly, "stay after briefing." The words were quiet, but they hit like a hammer. Dorsey forced a laugh, brittle. "Sure, Captain, whatever you need." Naomi nodded once, expression unreadable, and began the briefing. She spoke about procedure updates, body camera compliance, use of force reporting, community relations. The content was routine, but the room listened like their careers depended on it, because something was happening beyond the words. Ethan watched Dorsey out of the corner of his eye. The sergeant didn't look bored anymore. He looked trapped. When briefing ended, officers filed out quickly, pretending not to watch. Ethan lingered near the doorway, torn. Naomi's eyes met his for half a second. Recognition again. She didn't call him. She didn't signal. She simply let him choose. Ethan hesitated, then stepped back into the room as the last officer left. Now it was just three of them: Naomi, Dorsey, Ethan. Dorsey crossed his arms, trying to regain control. "Captain, I'm sure we got off on the wrong foot." Naomi raised a hand gently. "You assaulted me," she said calmly. Dorsey's face tightened. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," Naomi corrected. Dorsey swallowed. "Look, Captain, I thought you thought I was powerless," Naomi said. The words were still calm, but they cut deeper than shouting. Dorsey forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is personal." Naomi stepped closer, just enough to shift his breathing. "It became personal when you struck a woman in public," she said. "Now it's procedural." Dorsey's voice rose slightly. "Captain, you can't." Naomi's tone stayed level. "I can." She reached into a folder and slid papers across the table. Complaint report, medical documentation, witness statements, video stills. Dorsey stared, color draining from his face. Ethan's hands trembled slightly at his sides. Naomi looked at Ethan. "Officer Price," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "Were you present?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes." "Did you see Sergeant Dorsey strike me?" Ethan's heart hammered. He looked at Dorsey. Dorsey's eyes begged without saying it. Ethan looked back at Naomi. She didn't threaten. She didn't plead. She just waited. Ethan's voice came out hoarse. "Yes." The word landed like a crack through ice. Dorsey's head snapped toward him. "Price," Naomi raised her hand again. "Sergeant," she said calmly, "you will not intimidate witnesses." Dorsey's jaw clenched so hard the muscle jumped. Naomi slid another page forward. "Effective immediately. You are relieved of duty pending investigation," she said. Dorsey's laugh burst out, sharp and disbelieving. "You can't do that on your first day." Naomi's eyes were cold now. "I can do it on my first breath," she said, "because it was already written before I walked in." Dorsey's face twisted. "This is revenge." Naomi didn't blink. "This is accountability," she said. "Revenge would be easy. Accountability takes paperwork." She turned slightly toward Ethan. "Officer Price," she said, "you will provide a full statement before end of shift." Ethan nodded, throat tight. "Yes, ma'am." Dorsey stepped forward, voice rising. "You're going to ruin my career over one misunderstanding." Naomi's voice stayed quiet. "You ruined your career the moment you thought your badge was permission." Silence slammed down. Dorsey looked like he might lunge. Then he remembered where he was. He backed away slowly, shaking with anger he couldn't direct. Naomi watched him, calm. "Turn in your weapon and badge," she said. Dorsey's hands trembled as he unclipped his holster, placed it on the table, then slid his badge beside it. The sound of metal against wood echoed like an ending. Dorsey stormed out. The door slammed. Ethan stood frozen. Naomi exhaled slowly. Then her shoulders softened for the first time. She looked at Ethan. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. Ethan's eyes filled, not with tears that fell, but with pressure he couldn't release. "I didn't stop him," he whispered. Naomi nodded. "I know," she said. "But you stopped him now." Ethan swallowed. "What happens next?" Naomi's voice returned to calm authority. "Next," she said, "the truth becomes official." The investigation moved faster than Dorsey expected and slower than Naomi wanted. Body cam footage from the coffee shop didn't exist. Dorsey hadn't activated his, but the coffee shop had security cameras. The footage was clear. The slap was undeniable. The cuffing, the shove, the mocking, all of it. Witnesses came forward once they learned who Naomi was, not because they suddenly cared more, but because they finally believed someone would listen. Naomi sat through interviews with the same calm she used in courtrooms and command rooms. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't dramatize. She documented. Ethan wrote his statement with shaking hands. Each sentence felt like it cost something. It did. Because the next day, officers who used to nod at him stopped doing it. He felt eyes on his back in hallways. He heard whispers, "Traitor, snitch, weak." He wanted to quit. Then he remembered Naomi's face in the cell. Not angry. Certain. He stayed. Northbridge-level influence didn't exist here, but precinct culture did, and culture fights back. Dorsey hired a lawyer. He tried to claim Naomi provoked him. He tried to claim he feared for his safety. He tried to claim the slap was necessary force in response to aggressive behavior. The prosecutor watched the footage once, then watched it again, then said, "No." Charges were filed: assault, unlawful detention, false reporting, abuse of authority. The day Dorsey was arraigned, the courthouse hallway felt like ice. He walked in wearing a suit that couldn't hide the bitterness in his eyes. He spotted Naomi across the hall, standing in uniform beside a prosecutor. Dorsey's mouth twisted. "You happy now?" he hissed. Naomi looked at him calmly. "I'm focused," she replied. Dorsey spat a bitter laugh. "You set me up." Naomi's eyes were steady. "You set yourself," she said. "I just held up the mirror." The trial became the kind of story people argued about at kitchen tables. Some said Dorsey was a monster. Some said he was a product. Some said Naomi was brave. Some said she was calculating. Some said Ethan was a hero. Some said he was a snitch. The truth didn't care what people called it. The truth sat in footage and paperwork and sworn statements. In court, Naomi testified without emotion, not because she lacked it, because she refused to let emotion become a distraction. Ethan testified too. His voice shook at first, then steadied. When Dorsey's defense attorney tried to corner him, Ethan didn't break. He looked at the jury and told them what he saw: a man with authority using it like a weapon, and a woman refusing to beg for dignity. The verdict came fast: guilty on all major counts. Dorsey's face collapsed into disbelief. The judge sentenced him with a tone that carried no satisfaction, only consequence. Prison did not care about his old rank. It did not care about his badge. It cared about what he was now, another man in a numbered uniform. At first, Dorsey tried to carry himself like he was still in charge. He pushed too hard. He talked too loud. He tried to intimidate people who had nothing to lose. That worked in a precinct. It didn't work in a cell block. The first time he got checked, it was quick. A shove in the line, a shoulder into his chest, a whispered sentence behind him. "You're not special here." The second time, it was worse. A tray knocked from his hands in the cafeteria, laughter around him, no officers to back him up, no rookies to intimidate, just consequence. He started keeping his head down, but even keeping your head down doesn't erase history. One night, in the dim light of the unit, a man slid into the bunk across from him. Quiet, older, eyes sharp. "You a cop?" the man asked. Dorsey hesitated. Lying wouldn't help. The rumor had already moved. "Used to be," Dorsey muttered. The man nodded slowly. "You ever hit somebody who didn't deserve it?" Dorsey's jaw tightened. The man smiled without warmth. "Yeah," he said. "You did." Dorsey swallowed. The man leaned back. "Now you know what it feels like," he said softly. "To be powerless." Dorsey's throat worked. He wanted to argue. He wanted to threaten. But the words didn't come. Because the truth had finally entered his body the way it entered his victims. Through helplessness. Months passed. Dorsey lost weight, lost certainty, lost the swagger that had once filled rooms. He learned to listen to footsteps, to read eyes, to anticipate danger the way civilians did when he approached them in uniform. His karma wasn't dramatic. It was daily. It was living inside the consequences of being treated the way he treated others. Outside, Ethan continued working under Naomi's oversight. He expected retaliation. He got it. Not official, not documented, just cold shoulders and harder assignments. One night, after a long shift, Ethan stood in the precinct parking lot staring at his car, hands shaking. Naomi stepped out behind him. "You're still here," she said. Ethan turned. "I don't know why," he admitted. Naomi's voice softened. "Because you're learning who you are," she said. Ethan swallowed. "They hate me." Naomi nodded. "Some will," she said. "Because you reminded them they have choices." Ethan looked down. "I'm scared," he admitted. Naomi's eyes were steady. "So am I," she said. Ethan blinked. "You?" Naomi nodded once. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," she said. "It's documentation while your hands shake." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. A year later, Dorsey sat in a prison classroom older than he'd ever felt. A counselor asked him to talk about accountability. He stared at the table for a long time. Then he spoke quietly. "I thought my badge was permission," he said. The counselor waited. "I thought people were less than me," Dorsey continued. "And I thought nothing could touch me." A pause. Then, "I met consequence." He didn't say Naomi's name. He didn't need to. Outside, Naomi stood at a graduation ceremony for new officers, watching fresh faces take oaths. She scanned the line, eyes sharp. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for the pause. The moment someone hesitated before using power. Ethan stood among the graduates, now no longer a rookie. His posture was steady. His eyes were different. When he caught Naomi's gaze, he nodded once. A quiet acknowledgement. A promise. Power would keep tempting people. Uniforms would keep changing what others assumed. But somewhere inside the same system that had once caged her, a new kind of officer was being shaped, not by slogans, but by consequences. And Naomi Kingsley, once treated like nobody in a coffee shop, now held the kind of authority that could either crush or correct. She chose to correct, because she knew what it felt like when nobody did.